Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way, YouTube will keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. My name is Chris, 28 years old. I'm working in the auto parts business. My girlfriend is Daria, and we have been in love for 3 years. We're really close with another couple, Oscar and Emily. They were getting married at the end of that year. Over Labor Day, 4 of us took a long road trip across the states. We figured the trip would take about a week. We got all the essentials ready and were pumped to load up the new Chevrolet Silverado. Oscar and I switched off driving. For the first 3 days of the trip, everything went really smoothly. We discovered new places, amazing scenery, great people, and delicious food. Everything was wonderful. We really soaked up the good times with youth, love, and friendship. On the 4th day, we drove over to the Panhandle in northwest Texas. The air of the countryside was so fresh and peaceful. We pulled over by a cornfield next to a clear lake. The size of that cornfield was just unbelievable. The green was so refreshing to look at, and the smell of the grass was just amazing. I just watched for a bit and started to wonder, why are there so many scarecrows if they're just attracting more crows? Emily and Oscar noticed it too and agreed. The corn plants were fully grown, but they were really dry, like they hadn't been taken care of in days. Emily wasn't a fan of crows. She always thought they brought bad luck. But my friend Daria thought all animals were cute, so she wasn't bothered by them at all. Daria walked over to a crow that was hanging out on the ground near us. We took our eyes off Daria and looked at the lake and cornfield. Suddenly, Daria screamed and startled all 3 of us. "The crow, it's eating a human finger!" Oscar burst out laughing and said, "Crows eat meat too. It's just an unlucky little bird." Emily agreed with Oscar and suggested we head to the lake to swim. Oscar was all for it. I took Daria's hand, quickly pulling her into the fun. That crow thing quickly left my mind. While I was having a great time swimming in the lake, I heard this weird groaning sound coming from somewhere. I looked over at the cornfield and listened closely. Oscar tapped me on the shoulder and asked what was up. After I mentioned hearing someone groaning, the others tried to listen closely, but they couldn't hear anything. It was probably just the water flowing in and messing with my hearing. We went back to having fun until we were all tired and starving. By the afternoon, we talked about setting up a tent and camping out here for the night. We had 2 tents set up and a barbecue going. We all had dinner together and enjoyed some wine. Toward the end of the little party, the wine bottle was nearly empty. Oscar and I were a bit tipsy and ended up acting like total goofballs. Because of some random comment, we both lost it, which led to an argument and a bit of a fight. Daria and Emily quickly stepped in and stopped us, but the harsh words and punches that had been thrown couldn't be undone. We headed to the tents we'd set up earlier, and Daria was busy bandaging my elbow. Out of nowhere, we heard a car engine, and Daria and I jumped out of the tent right away. Oscar and Emily drove off. Daria ran after them, shouting loudly, but the car just sped up even more. She was desperately calling out her friends' names. I was just stunned, feeling really angry and let down by their behavior. When I got back to the tent, I hugged Daria, who was crying and scared. I reassured Daria that everything would be fine. We still had our phone, so we could just call a ride and go home. But then we were hit with a huge letdown. The phone had no signal at all. Daria and I had to sleep in the tent until morning. In the middle of the night, I woke up groggy from hearing a loud scream. I yanked open the tent door and looked outside. It was dark, with insects chirping, but no more screams. The scarecrow in the cornfield had its head tilted to one side and was staring right at me. My heart skipped a beat when I saw its face peeking out from under the wide-brimmed hat. Its eyes looked almost white. I didn't want to know, and I definitely didn't want to find out. I quickly locked the tent door and lay down next to Daria. I was not sure how much later, but I woke up again. Seeing Daria sitting there, looking terrified and staring at the tent door, I jumped up and asked her what was wrong. Daria was shaking and then started crying, saying, "I heard Emily crying for help." I hugged my girlfriend and said, "It's just a dream. Everything will be okay." Suddenly, we heard a noise like something falling right outside the tent door, and it freaked us out. A flock of crows swooped down on the fallen object and started fighting over their midnight snack. But then a horrible stench filled our nose, almost making us gag, along with the noise of the crows. I opened the tent door to try and scare the crows away and get rid of the smell. But I screamed in panic when I saw what the crows were fighting over. It was a rotting human head. The eyes had been pecked out by crows. Some of the flesh had been eaten, and the lips were sewn tightly shut. I grabbed Daria's hand, but her legs were so weak she could barely stand. The scarecrow I'd just seen collapsed as soon as we ran past it. The awful-smelling slime splattered all over the ground. We were so freaked out we collapsed when we realized that the scarecrow had lost its head. I dragged Daria with me, running as fast and as far as I could, since we had no other option. When we saw the house, it felt like a beacon of hope. I pounded on the door, desperately begging for help. A middle-aged man opened the door, and once we were inside, I told him everything that had happened. The landlord also helped us call the police. After we reported everything to the police, the landlord kindly let us stay overnight. The next morning, we went back to the cornfield. Daria and I were surprised to see the Silverado in the field with its front end all smashed up. The police found over 10 scarecrows scattered around the field, and they were all actual people. They all had been tortured in the same way. Their hands and feet were tied, their mouths sewn shut, and they were dressed in sacks to look like scarecrows. Some had hats on, while others had sacks over their heads. 4 of them had died from hunger and exhaustion. They were identified as people who had been missing for the past 3 weeks. Among the scarecrows were Oscar and Emily. Emily had her lips sewn shut, but the rest of her was otherwise okay. Oscar, on the other hand, was badly injured and had lost a lot of blood. Emily told the police that 2 tall guys in scarecrow-like sacks had blocked their car. Oscar lost control of the car and ended up crashing into a big tree. Since he fought back, Oscar got brutally beaten by the 2 men, while Emily desperately begged them to stop. A few months have passed, and Emily and Oscar had their wedding. Things between us have also gotten better. But the 2 cold-blooded murderers are still at large. Who knows what they'll do next? We just wanted to get away from the suffocating atmosphere of the base for the weekend. None of us thought that a simple road trip would lead us to face something unexpected. At the time, I was 24, a recent college graduate, and had been stationed at Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas, as a communications specialist. Life on the base was pretty boring, just work and long nights in the barracks. That is until I met 2 friends. Reese was a radar technician, and Jalen was an officer. We decided to drive to Austin to escape the stuffy atmosphere of the base. Jalen offered to use her car. We left in the morning, and the road stretched out straight through the dry fields. There weren't many cars on the road. Only a semi-truck would pass by now and then. About an hour into our drive, Reese looked behind us. She pointed to a black Tahoe that was driving behind us. It's been following us for a while now. I didn't think much of it until Reese kept watching. When Jalen sped up, the Tahoe also sped up. When we slowed down, it also slowed down, always keeping the same distance. Jalen tried changing lanes, and the car also changed lanes. The Tahoe had black tinted windows, so we couldn't see who was inside. Looking closer, I saw a small black light bar on top of the car, but I wasn't sure. We kept driving for a while. Then the Tahoe turned on its warning lights and pulled us over. So my guess about the lights was right. Undercover cops? Jalen mumbled and slowly pulled over to the side of the road. The Tahoe stopped right behind us, with its lights still flashing, but there was no siren sound. A tall man got out of the Tahoe, wearing a police uniform. I watched him every second. When he got close enough, I realized that he didn't have the word police clearly on his chest or hat, just a small patch on his sleeve that I couldn't read. Instead of going straight to the driver's window, he slowly walked to the back of our car, where he stood for a few seconds, looking through the rear window. Reese rolled down her window and asked what was wrong, but the man didn't answer. He slowly approached the driver's door, his face emotionless as he looked at each person in the car. Driver's license and registration? Jalen reached for her license in her purse and asked, "What did we do wrong?" But there was no answer. Still, she reluctantly handed over the documents. The man went back to the Tahoe and sat in it for a long time. About 15 minutes passed as we sat in silence, watching him through the rearview mirror. Finally, the Tahoe door opened again. But this time, it wasn't just one man. 3 men got out. They were all wearing the same uniform, but I still couldn't see any official markings. When they got closer, I could clearly see their harsh faces and cold eyes. The one in the lead had a small scar running from the corner of his eye down his cheek. "Is your father a service member?" The question was completely unexpected. He pointed to the U.S. military sticker on the back window of Jalen's car. "No, sir. I am a service member. They are too," Jalen replied with confidence. At that moment, I saw a change on the man's face. His body seemed to freeze. His eyes quickly glanced at the 2 men standing behind him. A few seconds of tense silence passed. Then he turned back to Jalen. His face was suddenly more relaxed, but his voice was awkward. "Okay, all right. I'll let you off with a warning this time, but you should drive slower on this road." He gave her the documents back and wished us a good day. The 3 men went back to the Tahoe, got in, and sped away while telling us to drive slowly. We stayed in our car and didn't drive away yet. Reese argued that they were not real police officers, citing her reasons. No clear badge, and why would he ask about Jalen's father when it had nothing to do with a traffic violation? Jalen also wondered why there were 3 men when police usually only go in groups of 1 or 2. We decided to turn back to the base instead of continuing to Austin. The whole way back, Reese kept saying that those men were definitely up to no good. A week later, we were watching the local news. On the screen, a reporter was standing next to a ditch by the highway, only about 20 miles from where we were stopped. 2 bodies had been found there, a middle-aged couple. The reporter announced that the victims had been robbed and murdered. The car found near the scene was a black Tahoe, which had been reported stolen 3 months earlier in Arkansas. We were stunned after hearing the news. We immediately called the police to provide information about our encounter a week earlier. They took our statements and said they would investigate, but I knew it was too late. Those men had disappeared without a trace. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if we didn't have that military sticker on the car. I'm certain that it saved our lives that day. On our way back from a long trip, we just wanted to get home. But a stop in the middle of a rainy night made everything take an unexpected turn. That was the night I learned that not everyone who knocks on your car window needs help. My girlfriend and I had recently taken a long road trip to California. The trip there was completely normal. However, on the way back home, we started in the middle of the day, and most of the drive was at night. We were tired after the trip and just wanted to get back to our cozy home as soon as possible. The trip took about 10 hours each way, not including stops for food. We stopped to eat twice. The first time after about 3 hours of driving, and then again late at night. We got off the highway around 12:30 a.m. and went to the nearest Wendy's to eat. The late-night atmosphere was quiet, with only the sound of the car engine and the dim neon lights from the stores that were still open. We got back on the highway. I was driving and eating my chicken nuggets. My girlfriend hadn't finished her Baconator, but she wasn't in the mood because I kept rushing her. I knew she was annoyed, but I just wanted to get home sooner. Not long after we got back on the highway, it started to rain. My girlfriend made me pull over. She didn't want me to eat and drive in bad weather. I was a little annoyed at being told to stop. A feeling of frustration and exhaustion washed over me. But I also understood that she was just worried about our safety. When we pulled over, it started to pour. I had just finished eating, and then we heard a thump on the window. The sudden sound startled us. At first, I thought it was just the noise from the rain. But when I looked out the window, I saw a figure. I didn't want to roll down the window because the rain was so heavy. But through the loud sound of the rain hitting the car, I couldn't hear what the person outside was saying. I only opened the window a small crack and asked the person what they needed. It turned out to be a woman. She was soaked and looked terrified. The sight of her made me feel both pity and unease. She asked for a ride. I couldn't refuse in that condition, so I told her to get in the back seat. My girlfriend looked at me with a look of confusion, as if asking, "Why did you let her in?" And I could feel her anxiety from the way she squeezed her hands together. I asked the woman where she was going, but she didn't answer. Her strange silence made the atmosphere in the car feel suffocating. My girlfriend glanced at the woman and then at me with a worried look. I looked at the woman in the back seat through the rearview mirror. I thought she didn't hear me. I repeated my question, and she was still silent. The tension in the car grew thicker. I said loudly that I would let the woman out in the next town we passed. Still, there was silence. This time it seemed like she was ignoring us. My girlfriend gave her a look of annoyance. About 20 minutes later, the rain had stopped, and we were able to move. We got back on the empty highway. Suddenly, a piercing scream came from the back of the car, and the woman in the back seat suddenly put her arms around my neck and choked me. Everything happened too fast to think. I couldn't breathe. The car swerved, and I quickly slammed on the brakes, almost sliding into the median. My girlfriend screamed at the woman to stop and started scratching her face. The woman's screams became more and more frantic. As soon as I got free from the woman, I quickly got out of the car, my breathing uneven from the shock I had just experienced. I went to the passenger side door, helped my girlfriend out, and then opened the back door and pulled the woman out of the car. She started to beg, "Please, please." That was all she had said since we met her. Her voice and appearance were pitiful, but I didn't feel safe at all when I looked into her eyes. It wasn't the look of a normal person asking for help, but something empty and terrifying. I ignored her, and we got back in the car. As I put the car in gear, there were thumps on the window. Her screaming was like a crazy mental patient. That sound haunted me for many nights afterward. I locked the doors and drove away quickly. My girlfriend immediately called the police and warned them about a strange woman wandering on the highway. Her voice was shaking, and she was probably still in shock after what happened. We didn't stop again and drove straight home. We both knew we had just escaped something terrible. The remaining miles home passed in heavy silence. Each of us was lost in our own thoughts about what had just happened, and grateful to still be alive. Months have passed since the incident, and I still can't forget the look in that woman's eyes every time I drive on a lonely road at night. The feeling of unease still haunts me, making me always check the car doors and be more cautious of strangers asking for a ride. About 10 years ago, I was driving alone from New Jersey to Texas to visit my parents. On the way, on a deserted stretch of road, my car started acting up. I kept mumbling a prayer to my car. This was not the time or place to have car trouble. I pulled the car over, opened the hood, and looked at the engine. The car definitely had a problem, but I didn't know anything about engines to figure out what was wrong. I was panicking and didn't know what to do. I didn't have an AAA membership, and my friends were thousands of miles away. I felt completely alone and unsafe, like I was in the middle of a never-ending void. There was nothing around but cornfields and a long, empty road. The wind blew through the corn stalks, making a rustling sound that made me feel even more isolated. A few minutes later, a white pickup truck with no front license plate slowed down and stopped right behind my car. A man in his 40s, with a rugged look, messy curly hair, and an uneven long beard, got out. He didn't greet me or ask what was wrong. He just introduced himself as a mechanic and bent down to look at my car's engine. I felt uncomfortable with the way he was looking at me, but I thought to myself that I might be too suspicious. After messing around for a while, he said he needed a compression test kit, and that his friend, who was also a mechanic, could bring it. He complained that his phone was dead and asked to borrow mine. At this point, I started to hesitate, but I quickly thought that if I didn't accept his help, there was no other way. As soon as I handed him my phone, he pulled a gun from his jacket, pointed it at me, and ordered, "Sit down on the side of the road and don't do anything stupid." I stared at the gun, frozen. My hands and feet were shaking, and my mind was blank. I did what he said, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst. He went through my pockets, took my wallet, my laptop, and made me tell him my phone password. Done. He got into his truck and drove away, leaving me on the side of the road with a cold emptiness and a feeling of complete helplessness. I stood there, shaking and angry. I gritted my teeth and swore I would find him. Luckily, a little later, another man in a pickup truck drove by and helped me start my car. The man kept asking me if I was okay, but I just nodded robotically, my mind still in a daze. And to be honest, I didn't trust anyone anymore, even though he had just helped me. I continued my journey to my parents' house. The next few weeks were a continuous cycle of canceling cards, getting new documents, changing passwords, and trying to recover what I had lost. Every time I got a call from a bank or checked my email, I was terrified that something else bad would happen. About 2 months later, I received a letter from a strange bank, thanking me for opening a new line of credit. I stared at the letter. Then came a letter from Best Buy with a credit card in my name and over $1,000 in transactions in a strange town in Tennessee. At that moment, I remembered that my Social Security card was in my wallet when it was stolen. Now he had enough information to become me. I threw the letter onto the table and ran my hands through my hair. The feeling of helplessness and anger welled up. the nightmare wasn't over. My life quickly fell into chaos. A series of debts, new credit cards, and bad credit reports appeared. I filed a report with the FTC, put a fraud alert on my credit, and froze my credit. The police weren't much help because I didn't have the bastard's name or license plate number. The road where the robbery happened also didn't have any surveillance cameras. Every phone call, every time I had to explain the story, exhausted me more. I also called the police departments in the towns where the fraudulent transactions happened, but everything was still at a dead end. It felt like I was fighting a ghost. The breaking point was when my health insurance company called, saying that someone had been admitted to the emergency room in Georgia under my name, creating a fake medical record. At this point, I couldn't take it anymore. My blood was boiling with rage. I spent all my free time trying to track him down. The image of his rugged face kept appearing in my mind, urging me not to give up. One night, I checked Craigslist in the areas where the fraudulent transactions happened. My eyes were tired from staring at the screen for hours. In Tennessee, I saw a post selling electronics and miscellaneous items, all of which matched the items that were charged to the Best Buy card in my name. I finally had a lead. I contacted him to buy the items, of course, through text messages. A few days later, he asked to meet in a public place and requested cash. I considered driving there myself, but I was afraid I would lose control, so I called the police department there. The details I gave them made them agree to work with me. I also talked him into revealing that he drove a red pickup truck. That day, the police set up an ambush. I was not at the scene, but waited for the results at the police station. As soon as he saw the patrol car, he sped away, lost control, and drove into a ditch. He was arrested very quickly. The crash wasn't very serious. Even more surprising, from his confession, the police tracked down a professional criminal group. They specialized in targeting tourists and solo drivers on interstate highways. In the end, they were all arrested, charged, and went to prison. When I heard the news, I felt both relieved and bitter. The losses and the fear were still there, but at least this time, justice was on my side. I collapsed into a chair, and the last tears rolled down my cheeks. I no longer drive at night, no matter how long or short the distance is. If I have to, I'll ask someone to go with me. And even though I don't drive at night, I signed up for an AAA membership. You never know what kind of unwanted situations you might get into. So be careful and be prepared so you can handle everything as smoothly as possible. That's the expensive lesson I learned.